Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to go ahead and jump right in tonight because we're going to be talking about fatherhood. And I know we got about 37 minutes here, because I don't want to keep everybody past their time. So hopefully everybody can see us. So with me tonight, I have Pastor Trevor Gant, I have Pastor LaRon Hurst, I have Bishop Heenan Tate, and myself, Pastor Frederick Connor, and we're just going to talk a little bit about fatherhood on tonight. So my first question, and I'll give everybody a chance to ask this question, is let's just say, somebody tell me what's the best thing, what do you think the best thing about fatherhood? Let's start out from that. What's the best thing about fatherhood or being a dad? Because we're going to talk about the difference between being a dad and being a father. So let's talk about, what's the best thing about being a father?
Well, I'll jump out there first. Hello, everyone. For joining. So, for those of you who don't know, 4 years old, and his name is English, and I love him dearly. I think one of the best things about having a child and being a father is just being able to see them grow and develop and learn over time. And it's amazing to see him from when he started out, as a baby, and he was premature. He was born 3 months early, and just to see the miracle, that he is, and just to see him grow and develop and and just become his own person, I think is one of the best things for me.
All right. What about you, Pastor Trevor?
Yeah, I say the teaching aspect of it. Actually teaching your child something, training them in something, and watch them actually take hold of it and grow in it. I think is pretty gratifying. And by the way, I have 3 children myself, so I have a 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old, soon to be
3. What about you, Bishop Tate?
I think for me, it's the whole challenge of giving them something from an experiential standpoint. I've gone through life, so I've been able to experience some things. So giving them that experience, and also it was always my objective. I always understood that my kids didn't belong to me. So for that reason, I always tried to put them in a position where with their relationship with me, they were able to see some type of continuity, so that whenever they dealt with the true father, that they could do that, because I knew they wouldn't always be my little kids. So I think that was great for me. And then on top of that, and then it must be some kind of addictiveness to it, because even though you're waiting for them to hurry up and grow up, you still some kind of way figure out a way for them to or a way for yourself to start over. I just started over with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, so here I am back in the water again.
Woo! I tell you, and for me, I think the best thing is I like the teaching aspect of it as well. I agree with everything that you guys said. My kids are older, 20. I don't know how they are, 20, 17, and 12. Daniel will be 13 next week. And I love just trying to be that example for them. I think that's my favorite thing, because your kids are always watching. So my kids, they keep you in line, and so that's, for me, that's kind of one of my favorite things, is just being able to teach them, and hopefully they don't make the same mistakes that I make. So with that being said, there's always that thing when it comes to fatherhood, the difference between being a dad and being a father. So let's kind of touch on that a little bit, on what do we think some of those, and I also want to, well, before we do that, let's talk about some of the generations. So, those of us, my father and those generation, what is that, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and talk about the difference before the generational, a little bit about the generational. What do we think what did we learn from our fathers, and what do we think the difference is between their generation and our generation? Pastor Trevor, I'll let you tackle that one first.
All right. So I think for me, discipline and respect. Um, it's starting to rain, so hopefully it's not distracting the mic too much. But like I said, discipline and respect is one of those things that I see a big difference in. I mean, I growing up for me, I never fathomed trying to like talk back to my parents or disrespect them. That's just one of the things that I'll be honest with you, my parents were great at putting the fear of God in me. Like I was just too scared to cross that line. And, my parents, they instilled in me a clear understanding of this is that line that you don't cross. You always need to have, a certain level of respect when you're dealing not just with them, but with other adults as well, too. My parents always challenged me to show the same respect, to other adults that I had to show to them as well. So, sometimes, when you're out and about these days, like, at Burlington or Walmart, wherever, you seeing some of the kids, talking back to the parents or the grandparents, cussing them out, that type of thing. And, that's an opportunity for me to remind my kids, of what we stand for. Y'all see the way that this person is acting over here? Okay, this is not I trained you guys. This is not how we taught you guys. You guys know that, this isn't how we get down. So, I say that's probably one of the biggest things that I've noticed is just that difference there, and just, from a respect and discipline standpoint.
What about you, Pastor LaRon? You're the youngest of the group, so your generation is still.
Yeah, I was about that. Some of the differences that I've noticed. One thing that I have noticed is that, and I agree with everything that Pastor Trevor was saying. I've definitely noticed that. Like my dad, he was very much about respect, and but one of the things that I've noticed with just overall generations, I can think about the previous generation of fathers, and times we'll see examples of them even in movies. Like think about, what was that movie with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, Fences, right? Fences, he was very much, it almost looked like stoic or emotionless as far as like the love you, the hug, those types of things. And it seems like that was a common theme amongst, that previous generation. It's like they cared, they loved you, but they showed it in a different way. And what I've noticed here recently is it's almost like a shift in even just masculinity in general. Like I was talking to one of the teenagers, and they were telling me about some of the music that they listen to, and they were like, "Well, no, it's a song that just really is about emotions and feelings." And I'm like, "Really?" Because back in even in my time when we was in high school, it was like "Nuck If You Buck," it's a little scrappy, those types of songs. But now music is even into like feelings and how I'm feeling. And so I have seen, which can be good, in its place, right? Because like even with us as fathers, like we tell our kids we love them, and we give them hugs and we show them that affection. So I have noticed that as a difference. Sometimes I think both of those are right in their place and in balance.
Hey, I like that. What about you, Bishop Tate?
I think for me, it's just the overall position that particularly fathers want to be in this season. With my dad's group, it was mostly go to work, come home, pay the bills, eat, go to sleep, go to work. So it was mostly that. They were taught differently. I don't know if I want to think that they couldn't do what we're doing now. I just think that, society and culture taught them that they are to be a certain thing. This is what it is to be a man. And I think now people have the courage now to step outside of that and be something more than just a supply. Because I just think about it. If I had to do it that way, I probably wouldn't even be married. If the only thing I was just a person that just supplied made sure you had food and a place to stay. I don't know if that would have worked for me. But again, just like Pastor Ron said, I think the affection part is there. You know, my father never did any type of affectionate hugging or anything like that growing up. But, you know, I do that with, I mean, I do that with grown Auden. I mean, I still kiss him, hug him, and all those things. And so I think that's the difference. You know, I honor my father for what he was in my life. Uh, that can never be taken away. No one can ever make me think that he was less than a man. I just think that it was my responsibility to take it to another level. So I took it to another level. I became where you could depend on me to supply things, but at the same token, you know, now you have this part that now shows you another side of what it is to be a man and not just go to work.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So let's touch on that difference now. Let's touch on the difference now that we've gotten this generational thing out of the way. You know, young men coming up, and the difference between being a dad and being a father. You know, I remember even at a young age, you know, my father would come outside and play with me. But I thought I read something where this young man was upset because he was like, you know, he was getting ready to graduate high school and he realized that he had a dad, but he didn't have a father. So I was trying to think to myself, what is he talking about? So let's touch on the difference between being a dad and being a father. Pastor Laurent, you want to take a stab at it?
Listen, I used to get confused about that when I was in school. They like, but dad, but I don't have a father. I got a father, but I mean, I hear the notion behind it. Now, which one goes with which one, I don't know. But I hear what you're saying as far as like I have somebody who, you know, was created life, but they're not, you know, now, you know, I think there is a difference in that, you know, with somebody who just gives life and somebody who's actually present and in their position and actually raising their child and spending time with them and teaching them and training them in the way that they're supposed to go. Now, what as far as like the semantics with father, dad, I'm English's father, I'm his daddy, I'm all of it. So
All right, let's throw this one to Bishop to Bishop Tate and see if we can deal with the semantics of.
A father gives life. A dad is a mentor, in my opinion. When we think about it in terms of how society looks at it, to me, the role of a man in his child's life is to be a father. Dad is a term that I think came about in the secular sense, that this is a person I have fun with. He goes outside with me, he runs around with me, he does all those things. And those things are good things to do. I just think it's more important because the father is the one that establishes the identity. And if the identity is not established, then you just got a really good friend. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of kids nowadays, is that they like I had a young lady tell me, she said, yeah, my mother's my best friend. I'm like, well, you really got it bad in life. That means you really don't know. And it goes to show though, whenever you see her do things, whenever she has to go off and do things, she can't cope right because she hasn't been trained. And only a father and a mother have the ability to train. And see, training comes when most people think about dads, they think in terms of, oh, this is fun. Oh, my dad is fun. My kids will tell you coming up, I was an extreme disciplinarian with Auden, Ari, and Serene. Even with Dre and Brielle, I am an extreme discipline. But by the same token, they know that we're gonna do some fun stuff every now and then. But I'm never gonna relinquish my position as a father so that you can feel comfortable with a dad. So that's never gonna be. So if we go out and we having fun, if you do something that's off in one arena, it's off in every arena. So I'm gonna discipline you there, and then I'm gonna move right on, and we're gonna keep living. So I think that, at times, and that's a very good question, because I've heard that before. What's the difference between having a father and having a dad? And what's the little cliche they say? Any person can provide sperm for a
Right.
child to come about, but then it takes one who can really be involved. And like I said, I bring back up my daddy again. He was involved to the extent of, there's two factors: the extent of what he was trained and taught, and number two, what he was willing and had the courage to do.
Mm.
And so I'm all of it all the time. When I'm preaching, I'm still my kids' daddy and father. Is no different. So there's no variations in it for me. That's why I can't understand how men cannot be in their children's lives. I understand sometimes they have issues with mama drama, but I just don't understand how, if God allows something to come through you that has your blood, your seed in it, how you cannot be involved. And I think that's where the difference come for a lot of people in having a father and having a dad, is the involvement of that person.
I agree. I love that. I love that. Pastor Trevor, I'm gonna throw this next question out to you. You know how, as parents and as fathers, especially, when we look at our kids, and I'm talking about their gifts and talent. And we live in a generation now where parents love to put, I guess the terminology, to put all their eggs in one basket. They want to make their children into something. So I want to talk about being able to discern the gifts and talents and how we cultivate those gifts and talents in our children.
Gotcha. Well, I would say the first thing is understanding that we as parents don't have the ability to make our children become anything. I think Bishop said it beautifully earlier, that as parents, we're just a vessel. At some point they have to report to God themselves, because that's who they truly belong to. So we don't have the ability to create an identity for them in essence. But really what should be happening is we should be prayerful and watchful as it pertains to our children, so we can properly discern who God has made them to be. So I think it really comes back to, acknowledging the true source of where our children come from. I don't look at my children, as coming directly from me. I just look at myself as, the vessel by which God chose for these children to be brought into the world. But at the end of the day, they don't belong to me. So I think that's the first thing, is understanding that piece, and understanding that we have to seek the face of God in order to understand what our children's gifts and abilities are. And then we can train them around those gifts and abilities that God has given them.
I love that. Pastor Laurent, you want to chime in on that? Recognizing you, huh?
I was just saying, I agree, wholeheartedly. I think, when that was one of the questions I remember asking, to Bishop Tate in one of our Bible studies, or I can't remember what setting it was, but just trying to, because I was always like, well, when I have a kid, what, like, am I supposed to just know automatically, or like, how does that work? And, I think one of the things that's, stuck out to me, of course, was be prayerful, but watch as well, and kind of, pay attention to them and what they, naturally kind of gravitate to as well. So I think those things have been helping me along the journey, and they can help other people too.
So what do we say? What do we say to parents? I've been out on the track field and the football field, and sometimes we as men, if you have a son, you want your son, everybody wants their son to be a football player and a basketball player. What are some of the things that we could probably say to, anybody who's watching this video and be like, look, I want my son, I know it's in his blood. People love to say that. It's in his blood. I just need to bring it out. So, what do we say to parents like that? Because everybody's not meant to be that way. But I think people believe that you can actually create a football player. You can take them to football camps and do that. So what do we say about that, Bishop Tate?
Well, for me, being here in Florida was a really eye opener. Now, I was able to detect even not with Serene because I wasn't expecting Serene to come here, but but I was able to before my children were born to actually peep it. Um, Now, what I did not do, I did not force it. I made sure that, um, like any good father would do, I made sure that they stayed around the atmosphere of what it was like to be successful. I always kept them around very successful people. Um, um, and being here in Florida was just an eye opener for me because I mean I watched these parents with these 4 and 5 years old, and I mean they're out there cussing them out and all kind of stuff. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, is this not what we've seen before with a lot of athletes that do make it, but end up becoming abusers, becoming all of this other stuff? I think sometimes people don't understand that to know that your child has the ability to do something, you still have to still find a balance because when you're thinking about those things, think about every career. At some point, you're gonna have to stop.
Yeah.
And so, what are you gonna be after this? So, my whole thing was is that I push morality, I push doing the right things, but everything else is just seeds. I mean, you're going to respect adults. You're going to respect um, those that are in a position. So that's going to be what you're going to mostly get a thrust from me at discipline-wise out of. Um, as it pertains to the athletics, you guys know that I trained Aria. Aria is the one child that I had hands-on from day one all the way up until the time she went to college. With Auden and Serene, it was on and off. But so that dynamic was a little different. Aria depended on me more, and since she depended on me more, uh, that released from me to give her more. So I don't know if you can see what I'm saying there. The more she depended upon me, I gave her more. If
Mhm.
Autumn was to come and ask me a question about, Daddy, how do you do this? Or how can I do this? Can you help me? Then that released a certain push from me. But if I was just throwing it at him, then he would less likely receive it. So uh, it was mainly with the discipline that I pushed. But when it came to the actual skill level that it took, that I saw what they were headed to in life, I released that to them as they came to me and asked for it. It's the same concept with God. That's why I always tell people that your relationship with your Father mimics your relationship with God. So if you have a child that very rarely asks you for anything, then they're gonna have a hard time asking God for anything. So
Mm.
really the child, just like the disciples, and I was reading this today, this is so funny. The disciples came to Jesus in the high place and he taught them. Jesus did not teach them down on their level. He made them come and ask. And when they came and asked, the Bible says he taught. Um, so it's the same thing. Parents have to understand that it's your job to rear your kids, to bring them up into the and and I'll say this. I know this is long. Children have the ability to do what they have the ability to pay for. That's I think that's a better way of putting it.
Okay.
If you can sustain it, then you can do it without my permission.
Mm.
That's the rule that I've always had. And if you couldn't sustain it, then that means I have some control over it. So you can't tell me in high school that I don't feel like going to school. Oh no, you're gonna be made to go to school. But if you get to the point where it's time you get out of school, I don't want to go to college, I want to just get a job. Well, if you can sustain that, you can do it. But you're not going to live in my house and not have something going on. So
Right.
that's kind of how I look at it, as far as whether you force somebody to do something or whether you just allow them. And I think for a lot of kids, I think a lot of kids wouldn't even do it. I think there's some professional athletes that wouldn't have did what they did
Yeah.
if their parents hadn't forced it. I think that, and it shows in when we see kids commit suicide. How you successful athlete got millions of dollars and you commit suicide? How you successful at doing something? And it's because sometimes we steer people who have a gift that can succeed in an area into the wrong area, and it messes up their mind. God, that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Laurent.
Yeah, I wanted to just say one of those key points that you were talking about was instilling like principles. I think that's one of the most potent things, is that it wasn't just a skill, but it was, I'm showing you that it's important to be integral. It's important to have discipline. It's important to be responsible. It's important to be accountable, and actually demonstrate with your life, of course, as well. But instilling those principles, because those things carry in any arena that you go into, and that favor as well in any arena that you go into. So if you decide you just want to just quit whatever it is and you go into another arena, you still have those underlying principles as being a good person, being, you know, an upstanding citizen, a faithful believer. You know, I think those things are important.
I agree. So
You
I
know,
guess, and then, okay, Bishop.
yeah, and I do want to add something else to it, and hopefully it hadn't slipped my mind. but you know, Auden just did a interview on some kind of it was a Christian based show. He did it at the Super Bowl, and they asked him about his upbringing, and whatever this thing was. Like I said, it was faith based, but they were at the Super Bowl, and they was like, well, what was it like to be a PK's kid? And he made an interesting statement. He said that a lot of people think that it was hard for me being that, but it wasn't hard for me. He said, my daddy always taught us the right way. My daddy and mama always taught us the right way. And they never pushed even religion on them. He said, we knew by example, by just looking at them, that was the most that was being pushed on us. Now, of course, they had to go to church. They couldn't sit there. They couldn't wake up and decide on a Sunday morning, I don't feel like going to church tonight. Y'all go ahead. No, you going to church. That ain't even a thing to even ponder. But it never got to the point where it was pushed on. And I think that's where the authentic relationship in life, whatever you do, whether we're talking about the believer's experience or whether we're talking about whatever profession or whatever you do in life, the authenticity of that has to, they have to have ownership of it. It cannot be the parents. The parents cannot own the authenticity of a child's future. They have to facilitate it. They become a steward over it. But we don't create anything. We're a steward over what God has already made. So it becomes our responsibility to pray, watch, and when God allows us to peep it, then you start facilitating around it all the different things that help cultivate it. And that's what I wanted to say.
I love that. I know one of the things for me, and I know Laurent, I don't know, but you know, when you have younger kids, I know as my kids were getting older, as one of the worst things, I guess for me, one of the worst things about being a father was watching my children run into a brick wall, because there are sometimes you could see it and you want to protect them. And there were times, I can be honest with you, there were times when I'd be like, no, wait, stop. But then I realized that my kids weren't really learning anything. And I think I remember talking to you about it, Bishop. I'm like, okay, so what's the difference? When do you, even if you see that they're heading in that wrong direction as a father and a parent, you know, a lot of times it's hard. And I think a lot of times that's what we as parents do. And I think anybody's listening is that sometimes we have to let our kids run into that brick wall, because if we keep preventing them from getting in trouble and from doing things, then, you know, they never learn anything. And then when they leave your house, you wonder what's wrong with them. And it's just like we've sheltered them so much. Oh, that's my baby. How many people hear that? You know, I never did that to Daniel, you know, as a little baby. I'm like, look, no, put him down. If he cry, let him cry. If he hurt, you know, hey, let him hurt. Hey, learn how to take care of that. And I think there's certain things that we as parents, and it's hard. It was hard for me. I mean, it's hard now that my kids are older. You know, they're getting ready to go to college, and I struggled with that when Mackenzie was getting ready to go to college. I'm like, oh Lord, okay, you know, what decision is she gonna make? You know, and you do. And even when you're praying, you be like, okay, Lord, look, wait a minute. I thought this thing was lining up. Now it looked like a curveball is coming in. So I think, I think prayer is very important. And hands off a lot of times is very important. Once God has seen it, because at the end of the day, they do belong to God, and they will have to at some point believe that. So I think another question, and this will be my last question, is there are a lot of single parent homes. You know, we live in Florida, and in Florida, there are a lot of single mothers that are here. And I guess for me, a lot of times, and for all of us as men, you know, when I see single mothers, I know I have some godchildren, godsons and daughters, you know, what is some, I don't know, I guess the question would be, what's a good role for us to, as men, especially as Christian men in the church, to be able to, if you see a woman, she has a son, for us to try to get involved, or that might be a little touchy-feely. So I'm trying to feel out the question on helping people raise young men and women.
Well, I guess I'll start. That's an interesting, because anybody that knows me know that I coach, I mentor young men and women almost on a daily basis. And one of the things that I've seen when you're dealing with single parent homes is, I'm this way, and this right here will not set right with a lot of people, but this is the way that I've chosen to deal with that. And that is this, that you can't allow me to have influence while you restrict it. And then on top of it, the next thing is this. I find out if there is a father that is present in the child's life, because I never want to usurp that position, that authority, that position that was given to that father. So I'm always constantly talking to my kids, especially when I get time to get alone with them, when I'm taking them home or whatever. And I'm asking them questions that relate to it without trying to be so direct with it, just to see how things are and where their head is. And it's funny that, you know, down through the years, I've been blessed to really, when parents give me rights to deal with their children a certain way, I've been blessed that I really haven't had a lot of pushback with it. But you got to be careful, because there's so many, just like Pastor Fred said, there's so many dynamics that's involved with it. As a man, you got to make sure that you don't become dad, possible husband. That is not the objective. and you got to look for that. I actually ran into that once before, where, you know, that started infringing upon a line that was put there. And so you got to discern all those things, because when you're dealing with a single parent's child, you're dealing with a lot of things. If that parent is not secure within themselves, it could spin off into other things. And then you got to be careful that you gradually allow that relationship to develop. Don't just take a child upon you. I've seen it happen so many times. You just take the full grunt of that child, and all of a sudden there's a conflict that comes up. So I'm very careful about it. I make sure that I include my wife in that process with those kids, with that parent, whether it's a mother or father, because I've had some single parents that were fathers too, to get my wife involved, to let them know, the child and the parent, that this is a teamwork, and you know, nothing in my house separates me from those relationships. All of that comes with it. And so, you know, it's one of those things you really got to pray about. And I've learned this down through the years, that the need is not always the call. You're not called to everybody. You're not. There are some children that I can't help. And I've helped a lot of kids, but there's some I just cannot help. I'm really good with the kids that are the hard-nosed kids that everybody else find it very difficult to deal with. Somehow or another, it always works well with me. My favorite athletes to coach have been kids that have been the most difficult to deal with when I first met them. And it's like we've grown. I even talked to some of them now. They're in their 30s, getting married with children. But you got to know what you're called to. And it can't be just, oh, I see something over here, let me go put my hand on it. And then before you know it, you're in a bunch of issues with the mother, the father, and all of that. So it's one of those things you have to really pray about and understand your limitations. Next.
Go on mute.
I was like, did you have a similar situation?
No, yeah. When I was younger, because I've always mentored guys and just kind of tried to be that older role model, big brother. Especially when I was younger. Of course, a little different now. I ain't trying to be a big bro. Now, but when I was young, I think I was like 20 years old, right? And I had a situation where there was a young man that I was mentoring, and I don't remember all the details, but I remember I think I didn't call him maybe one week, and his mom flipped the script and was like, you're supposed to be his mentor. You're supposed to be da 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 da. And I'm 20. Like this isn't.
Oh my God.
Still trying to figure out my life. I'm here as a help. And of course, I could understand, from her vantage point, and maybe have been a thing of, well, you missed a call like his dad. But that's just two separate things. That's nothing to do with me. But I just remember thinking, okay, you know what? I probably should be a little more careful and discerning when trying to be a light for somebody, and the need is not always the call, and so that's important to remember and to think about. And sometimes I think it goes back to, Bishop, what you were saying, even with the kids, with your kids, and how you would grant them access as they requested access. I think that's an important tool to use in those type of situations as well, versus just trying to come in and just save the day and be a superhero, a Superman. But no, let me make myself available. And as you want some insight and guidance, I'm here for you. I'm here. I done told you 30 times, I love you. I'm here for you. But at some point, you have to make that decision to get up, to take up your bed and walk. And so I think that's important.
And something else, you have to make sure that you remember that you are supplemental.
That's right.
You got to make sure that you are supplemental and you are not the primary source of parenting, discipline, and all those things. Because some, and I hate to say it this way, but some people want to alleviate their responsibility. That's why I really have a problem unless a kid's in a situation where things are just crazy and it's got to be a total removal or overhaul or something like that. You're not going to come to me as a kid that I mentor and get me to sanction something that your parents have already said no about. And I think that's key. You got to remain supplemental. You cannot allow yourself to be the primary source of a kid's life like that. At some point as they grow in time, it could end up that way. But you got to remember, you're in a child's life. And since you're in a child's life, there has to be some kind of, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but some kind of deficiency within the home in order for you to have to be in a position. So you are there also to help the parent get a hold of the situation. So you can't take over the situation. You got to be a hold. It's like one of my athletes, I ask him all the time, how's your mother doing? He tell me, you know, his mama said this. I said, well, if your mother said you're spending too much time tracking, maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing at home adequately enough so that when you leave, it always looked like you can do what I say do, but you can't do what your mother say do at home. I said, I got a problem with that. That is not the way this works. You can't just come listen to everything I say and then you get home and now you can't listen to anything your parents say. That's not going to work. So we got to be supplemental. We got to understand that we are not only trying to be a help to the child, but we're trying to be a help to the parents also.
Yep. Some plant, some water. You know, I think know in your position and not trying to, you know, even usurp God's authority and God is trying to do, because sometimes we can get in the way, you know, trying to put everything and trying to be Superman, but no, be humble enough to know, you know, where your position is in this and that you are somebody who can plant a seed, water a seed. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Pastor Trevor, I think I lost you. Can you hear us, Pastor Trevor?
I can now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I
I
went
saw,
through a little technical difficulties.
yeah, I saw you go in and out. And this is the last question because I know we're out of time. It's 8:34. And this is just gonna the last thing. And I think well, before I do that, Pastor LaRon or Pastor Trevor, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask, I'll give you guys the floor to maybe ask a question. I have been asking all of the questions, and you guys have been listening to Bishop talk and everybody else talk. Because I know you guys do have younger kids. My kids are pretty much grown. And I'm going to tell you what, because I know you two got boys, and Bishop, you might be able to talk to this, because I understand that Daniel is a whole different ball game than Aaron and Mackenzie. You know, my girls were, I mean, it was almost like smooth. Well, Mackenzie, I don't, you know, it was smooth sailing, but there was a whole bunch of flat tires and hurricanes along the way that, you know, had to come along to straighten her out. But as a young man, I know that Daniel is a whole nother ball game. And for me, that was really hard because I was like, wait a minute now, because I was doing the same thing with him that I was doing with my girls. And then I had to realize, okay, that's not working. So then I really had to sit down and think about, okay, so what is it that's going to take to get him straight? So I guess, and I know Pastor LaRon, you can't really talk to this. Pastor Trevor, tell me about the differences between raising the boys and raising girls, because you have that same household dynamic. And LaRon, you might have this in the future. We'll see what the Lord says.
Well, first thing I would say is make sure that you have somebody that you can call, because you gonna have some moments where you struggle. So, but honestly, like, yeah, boys and girls are just two completely different dynamics. Like, I'm trying to think of how to word it, but it almost seems like with Caleb, my son, he's just kind of more so like, for the most part, what you see is what you get. He's just gonna be, you know, he's gonna be a boy. You know, I know there's been times where, you know, he's struggled, and, you know, as a result, I've struggled, because, you know, it's difficult sometimes, you know, like readdressing like the same thing sometimes, like over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's just like, okay, like, I know you heard me, I know you understand it. At this point, I know you're just choosing to do the opposite of what I'm saying to do. You know, that part was rough for me. But, you know, on the other hand, like, well, Ava just Ava. Y'all know how she is. She the baby. She's gonna do what she do. But for Sanaya, for the most part, Sanaya, you know, she's a little bit more mature. You know, she's kind of taken direction a little bit better down through the years. But the one thing that, you know, I have to be careful of with her is I always got to keep my eye on her for what she's not showing me. Because, like, again, from what I've witnessed thus far, my son tends to be a little bit more upfront than she is. But, you know, you just have to kind of watch that dynamic just to make sure, you know, and I have talks with her as well too. I always tell her, you know, I'm like, listen, I first of all, this is what my so funny. This is what my parents used to tell me all the time when I was little. My mom used to tell me all the time, son, I wasn't born yesterday. She used to tell me that all the time. I used to hate hearing that, but it's so funny. I'm saying the same thing now. But you know, I tell her a lot of time, like, hey, I want you to understand something. You know, I know, you know, the whole daddy's, you know, girl dynamic type of thing, but I've never really allowed that to influence the way that, you know, I deal with her. And even for the baby, even Ava, you know, if it's wrong, it's wrong. I don't care whether you're a boy or girl. It doesn't matter to me. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. And at the end of the day, you know, the goal is to train them up, you know, to be men and women of God, to be upstanding citizens in the community. So, you know, I always keep an eye out on, you know, the manipulation, you know, trying to twist things, you know, and try and get on daddy's good side so I can get what I want. You know, I tell my kids all the time, like, listen, I see this coming from afar off, so you're not getting over on me with it. You know, I pull them to the side and just remind them, hey, but, you know, I have less of that to deal with my son. It seems like my daughter is the one that I mainly have to watch out for with that whole dynamic, you know, trying to sweet talk, stuff like that. You know, anytime, you know, something comes across the table, you know, I raise an eyebrow because I'm just like, okay, really going on behind the scenes here? What are you trying to hide from me? What are you trying to keep me from seeing? Is always my question. So that's just what I've witnessed thus far in my journey of my walk. I hope I answered the question.
No. I no, I love it. I know boys and girls. The dynamic for me, and Daniel's only 12. He'll be 13, and it's still an adjustment. You know, at some point, I just had to realize that there's difference, and I had to make some adjustments. I'm still making adjustments. You know, you know, I done told Mackenzie and Daniel, Mackenzie and Aaron, look, when y'all leave, somebody taking Daniel because I'll mess around and he ain't gonna survive high school at this rate. So, you know, and you know, but it is. And I guess we can sum it up and I can let everybody kind of go around. And, you know, if we had to give one piece of advice to all of the fathers that are listening out there on recognizing gifts and talents, you know, ways to make sure that they are, you know, when to be hands-on, when to be hands-off, you know, what not to get twisted, you know, as a father, you know, maybe what is one thing that we can tell everybody who's listening that, you know, not necessarily, you know, what is one piece of advice that we can give, whether they're a single father, whether they're married, on how to raise their kids to be law-abiding citizens, like the movie says?
I think one thing that
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead.
oh, you go ahead. Oh, so I'll go. One thing that I would say is just to demonstrate what you want them to do. You know, you be the example for them versus you just telling them, you know, do what I say, but not as I do. No, you be the example. You live to the best of your ability, live with integrity, live being responsible, being accountable, and then they will see those things. You know, they won't just hear you, but they actually see those things. And I think that's great advice that I've been given, you know, and I want to pass that on to other well.
All right, Pastor Trevor.
All right. So y'all said this one earlier, but it's a heavy hitter for me right now as well. But just not saving your children all the time too. You know, you see stuff coming, and you know, one of the things I think I've been guilty of a lot is like, okay, I say something, you know, I try and, you know, teach them something, and then the situation, the very thing that I've been teaching about, it comes about. And rather than allow them to navigate that, you know, that situation on their own, you know, maybe jumping in because I'm trying to prevent them from making the same mistakes that I've made in life. That's been a tough one. So, you know, you know, just making sure that we have that balance as parents where we're teaching, but then we're also giving them enough room and enough rope to make some mistakes. And that's okay, because that's a part of the learning process.
I like that. And Bishop Taylor, I'm gonna let you sum it up. Before I sum it up, we got two let me see, Jose Melendez says be the example. Vernon, the guy I went to high school with, says live being accountable. And I agree with both of those. We don't live in that generation. LaRon, I thought do as I say and not as I do work. My parents used to say that to me. My parents used to say that to me all the time. Look, do as I say, not as I do. But as we know, we do have to live being an example. And Bishop Hayes, I'm gonna let you take the last word.
Hey, Pastor Gillum. For me, it's, you know, take each day, one day at a time, understanding that you are a trainer. The most effective trainers in life are those that can example what they're training others to do. I know that one of the things that parents used to always say to me, the reason why they love bringing my kids for me to coach them, is that I could example what I'm telling them to do. They were used to coaches who were athletes, not keeping themselves up to the point where they could do things. That example means a lot. But also to understand that, and this is something that is a little, it's not off subject, but it is a part of the process, is that when you're a parent, don't forget, while you're training your child, you still have a purpose yourself. And you got to have the ability to live life. You cannot stop living life to raise your children. And that was always big with me. You know, me and my wife, is that we're not going to stop living because you're here. We're going to show you the determination that it takes to keep going, to keep pursuing what God has called you to. I'm going to do my responsibility in parenting you and coaching you, but I want you to know that at some point you're going to grow into an age where it becomes your life now. It's no longer me telling you what to do. So, and at that point, I have to have a life myself. So I got to keep living. So keep living. It doesn't mean pursue things in life that you can't ever spend time with your kids. I see that too much. I was telling somebody, I said, you know, that's what really made me fed up with the protesting, is that I saw people out there who were protesting about somebody they didn't know, and they're not even spending any time with their children. I'm like, how does that crusade work? So understanding your responsibility, you're responsible, first of all, to take care of yourself and to do what God's called you to do. And then from there, that flows into helping your children to accomplish what they need to accomplish in life. And let me say this, if you're married, your wife is your first responsibility, not your children. So make sure that fatherhood does not supersede your spouse. Your wife, or vice versa, if it's wife, your husband is your first responsibility. And then if you take care of that right, you will be to your children what you're supposed to be. If you are not married, then your responsibility is to make sure that you are upkeeping and taking care of your life like you're supposed to, so that you are fit now to help take care of your children's life. So that would be my response, and pray and ask God for everything, because the way these children are growing now, the influence they have now, you better pray.
Let me tell you what, TV is messing these children up. You don't see no more television shows where the parents in the house, or all these kids live by themselves. They got nannies and butlers. But thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I didn't get to all of my questions because we only had half a time. So I kind of jumped around a little bit. You know, there's a lot that children can learn, you know, fathers, about being able to show your emotion, your kids learning from your failures. So there was a lot more that we could have touched on, but because of yeah, Fatherhood Part 2. We'll see if maybe we can get this going without all the technical difficulties.
We do understand that it was user error, so.
Right. So LaRon, I need you to make sure next time when you're trying to share now.
That ain't.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.